Thanks everyone for coming. My name's James Horne. I'm the Director of Strategy and one of the founders of Balance Internet.
My name's Mel Williams. I'm the Director of Technology at Balance Internet.
So I thought I might give you a starting point, just to get a bit of a perspective on who we are and how we fit in with Magento, and we thought we'd do a bit of a history chart. Mel and I started working together in the online music industry in 1996. We've been working together for 22 years. Unfortunately for poor Mel. And the first thing, we launched our first e-commerce site together, which was in open source, completely custom, including building our own payment gateway.
And our own logo.
And our own logo, which is terrible, in 1996. Napster came along, iTunes came along, that business didn't work, and as a part of an evolution, we're sort of here today. We were formed in about 2008. We did a partnership with Magento, with Varian, with Yoav and Roy way back in the day in 2009, when we were the first Magento enterprise partner, or the first commercial Magento partner in the APAC market. Released our first Magento site in 2010. I think we did about 4 or 5 sites on Magento Enterprise in 2010, mostly franchise retailers. Through the journey, we've won a couple of Spirit of Excellence award winner pieces, which are really about our participation in Magento and the community. And as part of that, we were in the Magento 2 beta program, 2015. And in 2018, we've been involved a little bit in the bulky API project, so we've been doing some contribution to that as well. Along the bottom, I suppose you can see the sort of Magento framework as well. So you can sort of see we've been in the game with them for quite a while. What we're going to talk about today is sort of 10 tips. 6 of them I'm going to sort of try and lead the way on, and then I'm going to hand over to Mel to do some more technical ones. So for those of you who are non-technical, at about when Mel starts on 7, you can just quietly wander around. And those of you who are technical, you can kind of go out now. But anyway, I'm going to try and divide it up. All right, so we're going to go through digital transformation strategy. Hi, Aaron. Rescope and descope. Talk about minimum viable product and using out of the box, Magento 2. Talk about use of data and learning from the past, which is pretty important. Looking at the right extensions within the M2 environment, understanding Magento's global roadmap, and then a bunch of technical things which include data migration, infrastructure, automated testing, and M2 framework. So let's get into it. So the first thing we look at with our clients, whether they're existing clients or new clients and new partners, is to build a digital transformation strategy. So look at the pillars of the business, look at the strategy, the business plan of the business, the marketing plan of the business, understand the customers of the business, and actually don't just go, right, we're going to build a technical project, but actually look at building out a 3-year roadmap. And we do a lot of surveys and workshops with internal stakeholders to understand that. The process we take there, we've kind of evolved over a number of years, but we sort of get the merchants, say 5 or 10 strategy pillars, and then we actually align them with pieces of the project. So we come up with a sort of a grid. The process we go through is envision, align, and enable. The envision piece is the research piece. So we look at the data that you've already got. Might be in the data warehouse, might be in GA, might be in the existing Magento site, and other data sets you have. We might try and run Magento BI ruler over the whole site, so even install that on 1.x and get some insights out of that. And then do some global benchmarking, stakeholder interviews and workshops. So get a picture of the whole current state of the environment in M1, and then actually map that all out. Then in the alignment piece, we align that with the current project or the future project. We set a bunch of KPIs and tactical strategies, agree those as part of the project. And then we do the technical piece, the scope and specification document. What we've seen, and historically, we've just jumped to the scope and specification piece. More recently, we've been moving back a step to try and say, okay, what's the 3-year view, and how does that line up with the business plan and also the Magento roadmap? One of the key things we've been doing recently is the data science piece. So I'm not saying I'm a data scientist, but I just love data, and I love looking at the data and looking for nuggets of gold in the data. And the more data, the more data lakes that you can form and start slicing and dicing those and find out what's actually going on in your current environment, the more that you can get a better and tighter scope within the M2 framework. So you can use all of that GI data, Magento data, social media data, other stuff to go, okay, what are the insights out of this? And play those across into your scope. Could come out of New Relic from a performance perspective, could come out of your ERP and your POS system from a if you've got stores from a store perspective. But blending that all in and making getting some insights around customer lifetime value or average order value, conversion rates, etc. So do a transformational strategy piece up front to understand where you are now, what you're going to do and where you're going to go. The next piece, for those of you who came to the session we just did with Kathmandu, James talked about his machete. There he is. Do you want to talk about your machete, mate, again? So, yeah, if you want to find out about James's machete. But that's the descope bit. So when you run into a process going from M1 to M2, there's a lot of legacy there. There's a lot of extensions, plugins, custom code. So for those of you who are already on 1.x and you're looking to go to 2.x, do a bit of housekeeping on the way through. You know, do a bit of a cleanup and look at each extension and plugin and a piece of functionality that you have and say, okay, what's that delivering to us right now? Is that delivering a return? Do we really need it? Could we simplify it? Mal, do you want to talk a little bit to that technical complexity?
Sure. I mean, any time that you can reduce the complexity of the code base and keep closer to the core, then the easier it's going to be to upgrade and the cheaper it's going to be to upgrade. I think that's the succinct way to look at it. The functionality that's in Magento 2 is now a lot more advanced and feature-rich than it was in Magento 1, and so there's a really big opportunity to take out a lot of extensions that you've got in Magento 1 and replace those with core features that are in Magento 2.
We're quite surprised at the number of M1.x merchants that actually haven't seen a full, detailed and deep demo of M2 and don't necessarily, and just think they're the same thing, or there's just similar elements. You've got to have a good look. There's a lot of things that are in M2 now, and I'll talk about some of those things in a second, but they're really, really plugged a lot of gaps. So a lot of the issues that you might have struggled with or thought, gee, I could do this better, they've actually improved it in the core, so you can actually do a lot of things now out of the box that you would have had to use a customization or extension or a plugin for previously. So descope redundant and problematic components, understand the Magento roadmap, understand what you want and what's in the current state in out of the box, what the e-commerce ecosystem is and the plugins and extensions that actually fit with M2, and then also the conversations this morning and tomorrow about the roadmap. So there's elements in the roadmap from 2.2 to 2.3 to 2.4 that might be on your roadmap, and you can align yourself with that roadmap and go, you know what? I know they're going to be doing this in 2.3 or 2.4. We won't necessarily do that as a custom element up front. And using Moscow, it's a pretty fun tool that we love to use, but when you're assessing your current functional specification in 1.x, go, must we have it moving forward? Should we have it? Could we have it? Or won't we have it? And really be kind of aggressive and use the machete to get rid of the stuff that's not going to be right moving forward. Just sort of talking about, in general, about that approach of rescoping and descoping, there's obviously a lot of elements. About 2 years ago, I wrote a book with Kylie Lewis, who was with Kiki K, and we wrote a book called Add to Cart, which was really looking through, I think it came up with about 1,000 questions that you need to ask on all elements of e-commerce when you're doing a scoping project. We use that as the baseline, and some of those questions and approaches the baseline, but there's a lot of elements you want to look at, and you really should turn over the rock on all of them, not just the technical piece, but all the elements in the e-commerce ecosystem when you're coming up with your 3-year map, and then obviously apply those back to your current project and your future project. MVP and optimizing out of the box. So it's a really, if you want to get to market fast at a relatively low price, at a speed, the less you do to get it before you get to market, the faster you're going to be. And if you can, aggressively choose out-of-the-box functionality within the core of Magento, it's a lot more like a SaaS approach. So you're just basically going, you know what, we'll configure it and we'll turn it on. Now that's not always going to be the case, but if you can actually look quite hard and be quite hard on yourselves and the partner that you're working with around this and go, you know what, make sure that what we're choosing to do here makes sense initially, you can actually go to market and then have quite a strong roadmap of items moving over a 18-month or 2-year period, and then align that with your internal change management or your transformation. So it's actually lining up, you know, what we're doing with you or other agencies are doing with you at a technical level with what you actually have to change internally. So drive towards out of the box of the default and really understand that. Get a deep dive demo of it. Understand the features that you can actually utilize that are out of the box. Minimize customization elements. Understand those advances and improvements that Magento has spent a lot of money on improving from 1.x to 2.x. Some of those examples include staging and preview, Elasticsearch, CMS through Bluefoot, and Magento BI. So understand those tools, understand what they're bringing to the table, and utilise those as opposed to something else that you might think might be appropriate. I won't go through these. These are available on Magento's site, but these are just some of the things that are out-of-the-box capabilities in Magento 2. The list goes on. So there's a long list of things that are actually now native in 2.2.2, which is the latest version, or is it even later, 2.2.3? Yeah. So have a look at those, understand those, and understand how they might fit into your scope. One example around social commerce, you might not know that there's some functionality in 2.2.2 around that. So once you dive in, you might think, wait a minute, it's native. We'll use that rather than using an extension or a plugin. Number 4, learn from the past and from your data. Going from Magento 1 to Magento 2 is more like a migration every day and less like a replatform for us as an agency. I'd say in the early days, when we were participating in the beta program, it was quite challenging because it was a new code base and an advanced code base and a different code base. But now at 2.2, there's a lot of advancements that have been made. And what you can do with your 1.x base is actually put some analytics across it and understand it. So the advantage of going from 1.x to 2.x is actually you can go, well, we're in 1.x, we understand Magento. Why don't we put Magento BI, for instance, on 1.x and start getting some reports, start getting some insights? Why don't we have a good look at the data of what people are searching or of how they're behaving in the cart? Look at what's going on in your current Magento platform and apply those insights and learnings into your Magento 2 scope. So you can use data insights to drive scope. One of the things I love about using data insights to drive scope is it takes away all that subjectivity, all those different opinions, all those death by 1,000 cuts of every stakeholder in your business that wants to do this and that, the other. You just go straight to the data and say, that's not going to improve conversion rate, or that's not going to fix up our bounce rate problem, or that's not going to improve conversion in the cart. So, getting the data, you can actually you've got a solid foundation to make the right decisions on the basis of how your customers are behaving. Global benchmarking is a really good thing. We do a lot more of this. And obviously, there's more global benchmarking data out depending on what vertical you're in. So if you're in fashion, there's a ton of global benchmarking data. But if you sell some other widget or gadget or whatever, there might be no global benchmarking data for your vertical. So depending on what vertical you're in, there's global benchmarking data about what people are achieving, what their KPIs are in different market sets. Have a look at that and start to use that to set your KPIs for your project. And say, okay, we want to hit a 3% conversion rate or a 4% conversion rate or this customer lifetime value or this average order value or this page load speed. Set those benchmarks, not just on what you know about your own environment, but about what the global benchmarks are in that area. A lot of our clients, a lot of our merchants have got physical stores as well as online. In fact, it's probably one of our specialty merchants. And so understanding the behaviour of researching online and purchasing offline is actually critical analytic and a critical piece in the conversation and a critical part of the data. And the more you can blend the offline behaviour and the online behaviour together and start mining in those data, getting into those data lakes and understanding what's going on, the more insights you can use to scope your project. So scope with and from the data. Use your data to scope it. Use your M1.x data to help you scope your M2.x project. This is a shameless plug, so I'm going to do it. But choose a partner that's got a commercial digital strategist or someone that can do a lot of that commercial view. A lot of partners in the market are technical. Some organisations in the market are not technical, are more strategic. We'd like to think we're a bit of both. So we do a lot of that strategic work up front, that digital transformation work up front, as well as the technical work. So just one example, I'll just dig right into something you can do with some data. So if you get customer cohorts, so customer groups, customer personas, you can actually form those out of your data. So you might have half a dozen or a dozen customer groups that particularly if you have a loyalty program where you actually, people are logging in to buy from you, you've even got deeper knowledge of those people. But even so, you've got your customer personas or cohorts. You can use those cohorts and then customize, personalize, and segment both the promotions they see, what they see at a customer level, what they see on their journey through the site, but also the product data they're seeing by mapping the attribute architecture and taxonomy. So you can actually use the data that you've already got to drive sort of an architectural approach around the customer journey through the site, and also the PIM, or the product information management architecture of the site as well, when you're moving from M1 to M2. So that's just one example of how you can set up for segmentation and dynamic product-based rules. Okay. Spoke a bit about Magento BI. We had the luxury of having the Magento BI team in our office Monday, Tuesday this week. Absolutely fantastic. Spoke to a bunch of our clients, went through their current state, what they're doing with their current data, understanding it. This tool is absolutely fantastic, and it's been baked in time and to the core of Magento. It's already in the core of Magento, so if you buy Magento Cloud, the Magento Business Essentials piece is already in it, not the Pro, but the Essentials package is already part of what you buy when you buy that license. But what the insights you can get from that and the reporting advances that Magento has made by gluing that into the ecosystem are absolutely fantastic. So have a really good look at that product, and I urge you to go to the sessions that Magento BI might be running either today or tomorrow. On to number 5, choosing the right extensions. Mal, I might throw to you, mate, on sort of the history of extensions and plugins and how that's transformed from M1 to M2.
The whole history. Awesome.
Yeah, go for it.
So in the early days of Magento 1, it was a little bit of a free-for-all, which was a good thing and a bad thing with Magento 1. In the good aspect of it, it meant that there was a lot of features and functionality that came out very quickly that you could put into your store. In a bad aspect, it meant that there was also some developers who wouldn't follow, great guidelines or rules, and that would cause you, as an upgrade, a very big headache going on. The change for that into Magento 2 is that there's a lot more rules-based approach with Magento 2 and standardization as far as the code's concerned, as well as the marketplace that's available for the extensions that's checking these things for you. So there's a standard that an extension should reach if you buy it through the marketplace, and you can have a level of confidence when using that extension that there's an upgradability, a pathway that you can take, and a level of confidence in the code quality that you'll take on within the future build.
Do you want to speak a bit to sort of regression testing and automated testing and how that fits in that conversation?
Sure. I mean, there's a slide coming up on automated testing, so that's okay. But we'll touch on that then. But the fact that some of the things that the really good extensions have now is that they're also leveraging the Magento automated framework, the test framework, and putting their own tests against their code too. So that means that when you want to run full test coverage against all of your code, you can do that against the core product, you can do that against your extensions, and then if you put it on your customizations, and you'll hear how important I think that is later, then you can do that too, and that means that your full body of code can get 100% code coverage, which is great.
One of the reasons that you choose Magento is so you can innovate, and so it's a bit of this extension marketplace is a bit of a double-edged sword. You want to innovate, you want to change, you want to do things different to your competitors, but historically that's been a little bit risky in some areas. Now in this new world, you've got a lot more quality control coming out of Magento. You've got a lot more baking of these extensions into the core, which reduces the amount of regression issues and allows you to automate the testing. But what we've also done is gone deeper into a lot of these extensions and said, okay, what ones are actually working? Because we've done so many M2 implementations now, we actually know even deeper in the subsets which ones are really, really stable, which ones are really working, and which ones are getting great growth, revenue growth for our clients, and great increase in their performance of their sites. So the global roadmap, I think there was some discussion this morning in a session in here about some elements of the global roadmap. I think there's another session on tomorrow afternoon in the general session. You need to be across that global roadmap because that should align with your digital strategy. So one of the things that I and we at Balance love about Magento is that they invest heavily in their product. In the last 2 years, and Jonathan, you'd probably agree with me, some of the people they've hired are just fantastic. And I think a lot of the agencies in the room would agree that some of the people that Magento have hired at the product level that we've been dealing with are just sensational, really smart people. And so they're investing a lot of time and energy back into the product and making sure, and they're listening to us really to change the product and evolve the product and try and leapfrog the competitors. So because that's happening, you need to understand what that means and what that roadmap is and when that's going to come on tap and how that aligns with your 3-year strategy and line it up, because you can save yourself a lot of money. There's no point in going down the path of doing a customization in an area if you know that that's going to be potentially baked into the core in the next version. So one example around that would be Bluefoot CMS, right? So the improvements they made to the content management system within Magento 2 against Magento 1. We know a lot of you in the room would have a lot of frustrations with some of the content management elements of Magento 1. They've solved that by first purchasing Bluefoot and allowing us to use that as an extension, but ultimately, within the roadmap, that will be baked into the core. And that will allow us and you to use that advanced CMS functionality within the core of the product. And so you can make a choice in your roadmap about whether you plug in the Bluefoot CMS application or whether you wait for the version that's got it baked in. So understand their roadmap for innovation and improvement. It's changing all the time, so keep up to date with that. What's happening, what we're seeing, is that the version upgrade path is easier and cheaper if you set it up from the start. So in the 1.x world, there's a lot of frustrations with version updates and changes because you had to go back and test a whole lot of elements and things broke, etc. In the 2.x world, that's getting simpler and faster and better all the time. And so the upgrade cost and time and energy and risk is greatly improved. So I think it's almost exponential from my, I'm not technical, but from my perspective, I'm seeing it sort of jump up in leaps as the versions get on, that it's just getting easier and easier to do that. Do you want to talk a bit about upgrade, or you've got that in a later slide?
No, we can talk about that now. That's okay.
Okay,
I think that
I'll get a drink.
Here you go. I've got one for you.
No, I've got one over here.
You don't want the drink. You do something.
Like an old married couple, aren't we?
You know? No. So with the versioning, the Magento and the path that Magento's taken over the versioning, that's true. We've inherited that. It's now done in a way that I think they're not. I think originally with Magento 2, they tried to put it out against a cycle. They tried to hit deadlines with it, and that caused everybody a few headaches with the quality that was going out there. And the new team that James refers to that have come on have really changed the way that they approach Magento 2 in that sense. And our version now runs through a lot more testing, and the quality of it is the number one focus that they have. And going back and making sure that while features are released, quality features are released as well. And the quality of those features are also released. It's become a high importance in Magento. And so from our point of view, we don't mind waiting a little bit longer for a release to come out, knowing that the quality of it's much better, that we're not going to be left with a number of bugs, and that we can integrate that through and roll that out to our customers a lot easier.
All right.
Is this where everybody disappears?
Yeah,
or
I just wonder. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll run through some technical tips. We're not going to get too in depth because James has only left me with 6 minutes and 58 seconds to go. So thank you, James. Okay, so the first one is data migration. I've got 4 things that I think you should really think about when you're doing Magento 2 upgrade. The data migration tool that Magento put out, even when we first saw it, we were thinking, oh no, we do data migration, we can do that, it's really easy, it's just data, we can migrate it from here to there. If you actually look at the data migration tool and the effort and expense that Magento's gone to, and the fact that they keep upgrading this and they keep extending it. They have put a lot of time and energy into a tool that if you use, and you use from day one, you can confidently know that your data will go from Magento 1 to Magento 2 successfully. Now, what we can do is we can take 2 approaches. One is to try and migrate all the data from Magento 1 straight into Magento 2 and run that in a continuous integration every time someone does a commit. We tried doing that and it just slowed our pipeline down a little bit. So we've taken a subset of data from Magento 1 that gives us a good representation of the data that's happening within a client's Magento 1 store, and we run that through an automated process using the data migration tool configured exactly for that client into Magento 2, and we run that on every single commit that we do. So a commit will push off to our continuous integration, and part of that to get accepted into the code base is to make sure that any code that's been put in will not affect the migration of that data from Magento 1 to Magento 2. It takes the whole idea of data migration off the table. So I think that's a really important thing to look at. There's a lot of information on it at the dev docs. Just automate anything you do. There is other tools and other ways that you can do this. Our recommendation is if you have another way to do it, just spend a little bit of time having a good look at this tool, because I think that you'll change your mind. So it's very good.
Yeah. Next.
Next one. Infrastructure. So now Magento 2 has a lot more native support for some of the things that we would put into Magento 1. One of those things is like Varnish, so there's out-of-the-box support for that. What you need to do is, when you're starting your Magento 2 project, is to refresh your idea of how you look at infrastructure. Some of the things around scalability of Magento 2 are now a lot more powerful, and if you think that you'll be doing a lot of peak demand work, then you need to look at how you can start sharding the database off. You can start leveraging Varnish more. Look at some of the other services, additional services that are available to you with native support. RabbitMQ is a great one for integration and for any type of message queue work. Look at the Magento security scanning tool. You should be looking at that anyway, whether you're on Magento 1 or Magento 2. It's free. Look up Magento security, sign up. It's quite easy to do, and it gives you a lot of insight into your current installation, and it helps track when things are potentially right. A web application firewall should be mandatory, so plan for that. You'll need to plan a little bit of testing around that and making sure that things work. So when you do a customization, you need to think of these things and think of your WAF as well when you're doing that. You need a deployment and a development strategy with Magento 2. It just means that it saves you headaches, and it means that you can rapidly do things. What we like to do with Magento 2 and the power of it is that we can change things, and we can add features, and we can do things, and we can react very fast. To react very fast, you need to have a good strategy in place. If you're talking about something like Magento Cloud, then that comes with a fairly detailed development strategy and deployment strategy. So that's worth looking at.
Too early?
No, that's actually quite well done. So if we look at where Magento Cloud sits, it sits as a PaaS. I think we all understand what is on-premise, which is, largely Magento 1. We move up through infrastructure as a service and a platform as a service, and then there's a SaaS service, software as a service. So Magento Cloud, the power of that is that Magento themselves will look after all of these things for you, and you concentrate on the application. With that comes a detailed way that you do development and that you do deployment. It's very good. We've rolled out a fair few now, and we're very happy with it.
The beauty of it is that you've got the advantages of lockdown and a single vendor around which SaaS has. So you've got all this area handled by Magento, but you can still innovate up here. So you've still got the advantage of open source and innovation at that application layer. So you've still got the advantages of what you had in 1.x, but it's a lot more locked down, and you've got it all handled within one vendor environment.
Yep.
Next.
Go for it. This is just some information around Magento Cloud. It's a optimized and secure infrastructure. It's dedicated to Magento. It's done by Magento developers, Magento core team. It's looked at every day, and the performance is studied by the Magento group. They're putting improvements into it, and they're supporting it as well. So you're going beyond just the application, and you're getting so much more out of it. You can handle all these things, and there's a 99.9% SLA that comes with it as well. So it's
pretty much our starting point, isn't it, Mel? And any discussion with an existing client who wants to go from 1.x to 2, or a new client who's already on 1.x and wants to talk about us to do the migration, we're saying cloud straight away, and then sort of talking to them about their requirements. You still can do on-premise in the old model.
There's a lot of development advantages that you get from cloud, and the fact that it's built on top of the platform SH framework, that so that you can roll out a lot of changes and see things happen, and test things and test ideas without committing to expensive infrastructure to do that. I've got a minute left, so I'm going to go to number 9, automated testing. So there's automated tests that come that are out in the core of Magento 2. There's 100% coverage that we can get of the features when we look at that. It's almost a difficult thing sometimes when you're looking at investing in testing. You think it's quite easy to say that it should just work, but quite often someone has to test it somewhere, and now it gets to a confidence level. How confident am I that it is going to work, and how confident that anything new that I put out there is still going to work after I put something new out? So we like to look at it. It's a very big investment for the future. Financially, it adds an addition onto the project. from a core perspective, the closer you stay to core, it's out of the box. When you're looking at developing custom features, if you put it in at the start, then you get the advantage of it, not just from the deployment and the development cycle of the project, but for ongoing. So you get to build a regression test suite as you go. And I think we all understand that regression is where the real problems come. Once the site's gone live and you're 3 months down and you're trying to put a small feature out, or there's a patch, or you want to take advantage of the next upgrade of Magento 2, then the real effort that's required to do that is to do with testing the product. It might be a one-line code change, but you do need to run through a large regression test to be able to get the confidence of everybody that you're going to put out a product which is going to work and it's not going to affect your sales. So by starting with this idea, you end up with that at the end, and we think that that's such a huge advantage. And the last one is that Magento 2 is a modern framework. It's built on a modern technology stack. It's an exciting thing to work with. If you're going to work with Magento 2, don't think about it in a Magento 1 way. Start looking into some of the new concepts that are in Magento 2. Use dependency injection, plugins, service contracts. Use the Magento API and use message queues for integration. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot more robust. It can be self-healing as well. I don't know if Ben's floating around, but still don't touch the core. It's not something that you should touch ever. Luckily, when you start looking at Magento 2, and if you follow a good development practice with Magento 2, you can't touch the core, and that's also an exciting thing for us. If you use Magento Cloud, you can't touch the core. So you have to do it in a very responsible way to be able to change the product. And one other thing which we'd like to end with, is that Magento is a community. It's been a strong community from the very start. If you do something, really consider giving back to the community. It doesn't have to be everything, but it can be something small. If you have solved a little problem and no one else has solved it out there, then maybe just write up an article about it, or put the code back, or get involved in actually contributing it back into the core of Magento. It'll make the product better for everybody.
I think we don't have a lot of time for questions. Is that right?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Great presentation. We do have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If we want to field someone in the audience, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you.
No? Oh, sorry.
Very good. Awesome.
Cool. We answered everything.
And I guess that was the perfect presentation. So
Great.
thank you guys very much, and I'm sure you can find them around here, the hallways, if you guys have questions afterward.
Yeah, we've got a stand downstairs as well, so if you want to come and yak to us, we'll be around tomorrow.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks.